I'm Barbara Peters from Scottsdale's mystery bookstore, The Poison Pen. Our criminal calendar has been even more crowded during October 1997 with the UK AZ Festival, which has brought us many wonderful visits from British mystery writers. My oldest friend among that population is with us today, Keith Miles, who also writes wonderful historical mysteries under a pseudonym, Edward Marston. This is such a treat, Keith. I'm so glad you could come.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Keith and I met, well, you can tell the story. When was it, 1990?
I think it was 1990, Barbara. I saw a review of one of my books by you, and I was coming to Phoenix anyway, on my way to the Grand Canyon, and I rang on the off chance your store, and your husband said, if you don't come around here, my wife will be very upset. And so I came, and we've been friends ever since.
It was wonderful. We had a rather impromptu tea, as I recall.
We did indeed.
And a number of customers who sort of came when called.
Yes.
And at that time, you were still writing golf mysteries.
That's right. I walked in through the store, and the first thing I saw, because of course the Phoenix Open was on here, was an array of golf books, and two of my golf books were right there, and you had no idea that Edward Marston was also Keith Miles. And so I said, well, let me sign those while I'm here. And that's how we go.
That's true. It was wonderful. I myself remember what fun it was to read Bullet Hole, which was your first Alan Saxon, because I had been to Scotland a few years previously and attempted to play St Andrews. And Bullet Hole, is it the only golf mystery that takes place at St Andrews?
Yes, it's the first in the series, and it's set in St Andrews because that's the most famous golf course in the world, of course. And the great thing is it's a public course, so you can actually play there. And I went up and stayed in St Andrews and played the course. And my protagonist, Alan Saxon, and I write in the first person, as you know, played the course very much as I did. And the letters I got in were not letters about the literary aspects of the novel. There were people saying to me, you know, you made a complete mistake on hole 16. You shouldn't have played that shot. If you'd done this, you wouldn't have mucked the whole thing up, as it were.
Well, it was a wonderful book. I really enjoyed Alan. He's kind of a prickly character. He's a golf professional that gets thrown into detecting when there's a murder during the tournament. That's right.
He actually takes on, he drives up for the tournament, and on the way he acquires a hitchhiker. He doesn't actually invite her into the vehicle. She gets in anyway. And then, of course, when she's found dead in his vehicle later, that rather complicates his chances of winning, because he has to keep the police off his back while he's playing the third and fourth rounds of the Open, which of course he doesn't win that year. He has won it once in the past. He won it at Carnoustie, and the van that he drives in is called Carnoustie for that reason. So the first line of the book is, in fact, Carnoustie headed north towards St Andrews, which fools people because, of course, Carnoustie geographically is north of St Andrews.
Very true. And Alan then, because he's a touring pro, is able to go to other locations and solve crimes.
The second one is called Double Eagle, and that's set in the San Fernando Valley, and I invented the golf course there. The problem you have with a real golf course is that, as I say, everybody knows how to play it, and they give you advice. So I invented one that didn't exist. Number 3 was set in Australia, and again I found 3 golf courses and joined them together as a composite, and that's where the tournament was played there. And the 4th one, which was set in Japan, wasn't actually about a tournament. It was about Alan Saxon making an instructional video. But he got to play on some of the Tokyo courses, of course.
There were some fascinating things in that one. For example, I had no idea that to practice shots in Japan, people would hit into a giant net, because there really aren't a lot of the kinds of I'm trying to think of the word we use here, you know, when you go out to...
Golf ranges.
That's it. Thank you. Driving ranges.
Yes, there's an enormous problem. After America, Japan has the highest number of golfers, amateur and professional, of any country in the world. The problem is they have very few, it being a small island or small islands, very few golf courses. And therefore the premium on them is enormous. I mean, we're talking about in Tokyo subscriptions of £250,000 to join, which means you can only have corporate membership. And you make sure that somebody in your corporation plays every single day to get your money's worth. So the vast majority of Japanese golfers have never played on a golf course. What they do is to go to a golf range, which may be on 3 or 4 levels, and hit a ball 50 yards into a net. And the velocity with which it hits the net sends up a little sign which sort of says, you know, 180 yards, 200 yards or whatever. And they go home feeling pretty good if they've hit a 200-yard drive. And then when they have a holiday, they will perhaps go to Bangkok and play, or they'll go down to Australia where they can play on public courses all day long, or some of them even come all the way to England where they can play the famous courses like St Andrews, like Turnberry. you know, which are public courses, and enjoy them. So it's quite extraordinary that they love golf so much they're prepared to do this kind of substitute version of golf, if you like. And they play, some of these places are open all night. I mean, I went to one at 2 in the morning and there must have been 60 or 70 people on different layers. Everything from 16, 17-year-olds up to ladies in their 60s and 70s, all bashing balls into the blue horizon.
When did you write this series? Because the books came out relatively close together, just the 4, and then you stopped. I'm trying to remember the copyright dates.
I think I began in 1984. It was certainly the 84 Open that inspired me when Seve Ballesteros won. And the great thing about it, it's a 4-day event, as you know, and there's always an early leader. In that case, I think it was Ian Baker Finch, and we all put our money on him, and then he fell away. And Seve came through on the last day. And it seemed to me that was the perfect way to do it, to follow my man through the 4 days, as it were, which gave me the perfect structure, obviously, for the novel. And in between times, I drove around and timed how long it took to get from A to B, and worked out where the difficult parts were in the rush hour and so on. And all those elements are vital in a mystery novel. You must get, you know, distance and times absolutely right. And you must know the course, because there are so many people who know St. Andrews.
And when you wrote the Japanese one, there hasn't been, and I'm sorry, the title is gone.
A flag stick, it's called.
Thank you, flag stick. And Hole in One was the, no, Murder on the Green was the Australian one.
No, the Australian one was called Green Murder.
Green Murder.
Yes.
I know I can see the artwork because it hangs in your study.
It is indeed.
And it's a beautiful cover. After Flagstick, you haven't written, as Keith Miles, another golf mystery.
Not another golf mystery. I began to write the historical mysteries, and I began with the Elizabethan series, which is about an Elizabethan theatre company, as you know, Barbara, with my protagonist, who is what you would call a stage manager. In those days, he was called a bookkeeper or a book holder. The book being the one single book of the play which existed in those days, which was enormously valuable if you think of the one copy of Hamlet, as it were. When the actors came, they weren't given a copy each because they couldn't afford to. They would have a scrivener who would write out their particular side. So
right.
Burbage, who played Hamlet, would obviously have his part written out, but the bits when he's off stage in Act 4, for instance, he wouldn't have those. And people playing small parts, like, say, Osric at the end, or the Gravedigger, all they would have would be the parts that they said, which may be 2 sheets of parchment. So they would have no idea what happened in the rest of the play. They were simply told by the bookholder, by the stage manager. They came on in Act 4, Scene 1, as it were, and they did their particular speech, which made for an extraordinary sort of number of difficulties. If you were playing 3 or 4 parts, you might be the Gravedigger in Act 4, but earlier on you might come on as, say, one of the Watch at the beginning, and you might be recycled. Shakespeare had between 12 and 16 players for most of his plays, and of course they all have casts largely in excess of that. A play like Antony and Cleopatra has 42 scenes and over 40 characters, 40 named characters. Mm-hmm. So therefore you have to bring people on and recycle them very cunningly, so that A, the audience doesn't get bored with the same actor, but nevertheless the play keeps moving along. So that was all part of the art of it, and those actors would be able to pick up a script, learn their lines, slot that performance in, come back on 2 scenes later with a new performance and do that. All on the basis, as I say, of the little bit they were doing, with no idea of the totality of the play. So if you said to them, what do you think of Hamlet as a play, they wouldn't know it, because they only knew that little bit, if you see what I mean.
Well, it certainly made Nicholas Bracewell, the name of your bookholder character, the pivotal person in the production.
Absolutely. He was the key person, because as well as the bookholder, I use the word bookkeeper, he literally kept the books, which was so valuable, because, of course, if other companies saw your success with a play like Hamlet, right, they would try and steal the book. Or try and steal that particular play, which there was a copyright in those days, but if they were performing 100 miles away, there was no way you could check on them. And what very often happened was that we had pirated editions, which were based on what we call memorial reconstruction. Actors in those days had the most phenomenal memories. In the course of a normal season, they would perform maybe 35 to 40 plays.